Are you ready to become a change maker? Our 48-week postgraduate program in public policy or the PGP may be just the thing for you. This hybrid program is designed to give you both the theoretical foundation and hands-on experience needed to excel in policy making. With a mix of expert-led webinars, in-person workshops, and policy simulation exercises, you'll gain real-world skills along with personalized mentorship. Through our policy programs, we connect good people to good ideas and good networks. Apply now at the link in the description to make an impact.
Welcome to All Things Policy, a daily podcast by the Takshashila Institution. We are a bunch of policy nerds based in Bengaluru, and we like bringing fresh perspectives to Indian affairs and Indian perspectives to global affairs. So grab a cup of coffee, sit back, and join us for today's chat.
Hello all, I'm Sarthak and I welcome you to All Things Policy. In the last few days, there have been some interesting developments in the biotech space. A Dallas-based biotech company, Colossal Biosciences, announced that they have been able to resurrect a species of wolf that died out some 12,000 years ago. They claim these dire wolves are world's first successfully de-extincted animals. What does this imply for science, for ecosystems, and for society? In this episode, we will explore these questions. Joining me for this episode is my colleague, Dr. Shambhavi Naik. She chairs Takshila's Advanced Biology program, and she has extensive research experience in areas of emerging technology. And she has previously participated in the development of World Health Organization's guidelines for gene editing. She has also been involved as a drafting committee member for India's risk assessment of genetically modified crops. Hi, Shambhavi. Welcome to All Things Policy.
Hey Sarthak, nice to be here. Hello everyone.
So Shambhavi, before we start, could you just tell us about what is this news all about? What has Colossal done? How does it build up on the recent debate, last year's debate related to woolly mammoths? How path-breaking is this news?
Okay, there's so many angles to look at this news, right? There is the actual scientist angle, there's a public policy angle, and there's the lay people sitting in India thinking about why on earth are we bringing back things that have been dead for 12,000 years, right? And I think from each perspective, this event brings something to talk about. If you read all of the news lines, dire wolves are back. Is this a Game of Thrones impact? Now, I have not seen Game of Thrones, so I really don't know what their
Neither have
role
I.
in Game of Thrones is. But certainly they've managed, the scientists have managed to catch eyeballs because of, bringing back, not bringing back an animal, but bringing an animal close to a reference point that is popular in the world's imagination, which I think was very interesting. A pick of animals that they could have actually done this announcement with. So what have they done, right? What they have done is, I think for a lot of people, the idea of de-extinction kind of, I think, automatically takes them back to Jurassic Park, where they found DNA in that little mosquito, dinosaur DNA, and then they patched it up, and then they made dinosaurs in the lab. Colossal has not done anything of that sort. They did find DNA. They found a 12,000-year-old and a 72,000-year-old fossils, which is like pretty old DNA sitting around. They extracted the DNA, they studied the DNA, and they identified some unique parts of the genes which they thought were necessary for giving characteristics of the dire wolf, which were unique to it, so which are not found in current wolves, right? So they have identified genes which give characteristics of the dire wolf. They have then genetically edited wolf's DNA to kind of resemble those characteristics. So it is not taking 100% of a dire wolf DNA and putting that into something else. It is actually taking current wolf's DNA, living cells, and mutating that a little bit so that the pups which are formed actually resemble dire wolves, right? They then implanted these edited cells into hounds, and the dire wolf pups were born. So these pups are mostly current. So the DNA makeup is mostly existing wolves plus some unique characteristics of the dire wolves, right? When I think of it as a scientist, this is actually pretty phenomenal. A, the fact that you could extract DNA from skulls and bones that are so old, uh, and and actually have usable information on them, that was then extracted to make all of these inferences, right? So you can now look at a sequence of DNA and say, look, this is what we believe that this DNA is uh, encoding, and these are the physical characteristics that we want our, well, in this case, a chimera to have, right? Then to say that, okay, this is the composition that we think is going to be the best resembling a dire wolf. So let's do that in living cells from different animals to be able to make those gene edits and then be able to implant them into a living animal, and to then be able to breed pups. And there are three, I think, now, which have been living for about 6 months or so. And they definitely do resemble a direwolf. We don't know how much else in terms of behavior, etc. They will be like direwolves, but they do resemble direwolves. I think as a scientific achievement, this was phenomenal. There's a lot of lessons that can be learned. We do tend to do work a lot with ancient DNA, for example, in trying to even figure out human history. So I think there are pluses there that can be absorbed, and the fact that we are able to now look at gene sequences and be able to predict what are the characteristics, or do like, this is the characteristic I want, this is probably the gene sequence that I need to create, and be able to do that in living cells, and in higher living cells at that. I think is just, as a scientist, phenomenal.
Hmm.
It is not de-extinction. They have not brought back the dire wolves. Uh,
Okay.
these animals are fairly going to be different from what existed tens of thousands of years ago. Uh, but from a pure like science,
Science perspective. Yeah.
the weird people in the lab that we always think of scientists as, with the crazy hats and the crazy hair, I think this is awesome.
Okay, so I have just a couple of questions here, right? So the dire wolf is not truly back in that sense, right?
Yeah.
So one or two things related to this. Since you mentioned that extraction of DNA tends to be quite difficult, and they are using it. How difficult is this, right? Why have other similar kind of firms, research firms, have not been able to do the same thing which Colossal did? And also, is there a way to measure how different are these dire wolf pups from the dire wolves that would have existed back then?
Okay, so DNA extraction has been getting easier over the many years. One of the critical things is finding the right kind of sample. So the DNA has to be well preserved. We have to be able to extract it, fairly easily. I think we'll classically hear about this about the Rakhi Gari samples, for example, for human studies, right? We've not been able to. I mean, we got a bit of DNA, but not a lot, for example. So from human fossils, for example, those things have been getting easier. For this particular kind of approach of de-extinction, I'm not sure a lot of people are actually studying DNA from that idea. I think Colossal says on its website that they are the first and only company to be wanting to do this. George Church, who is one of the founders in Colossal, has been tinkering with this idea of de-extinction for a long time. He was the one who brought up this idea of woolly mammoth de-extinction as well. So I don't really know a lot of other research companies which are very much involved, or research institutions which are very much involved with this idea. I think the whole idea of de-extinction by itself is a bit controversial, needs a lot more debate than is currently getting attention. Um, but I think the more money is actually being put into trying to get DNA from fossils, the much better it is for us to understand our own history, to understand evolution, to find missing links, to find causes of death, etc., for species that have become extinct. So, from that perspective, I think it's important that this kind of research goes on. But apart from that, I don't think a lot of people are actually trying to get DNA out of fossils per se.
Yeah, and how different are these pups from?
I don't know how much we can tell, because we are trying to predicate their behavior on what we know of them from fossils, whether they were markedly different. We are obviously trying to also then cater to these pups from based on what we know of them. And finally, and very importantly, I think they are now in a controlled environment.
Hmm.
So it will be very difficult to tell how different they are uh,
Okay.
from diapops in the wild.
Yeah. So this specific case that we see right now, it is not de-extinction as such, as you mentioned, but do you think it is in the direction where again the human civilization will be able to do de-extinction? We are in that direction.
Yeah, definitely, we are in that direction of step by step getting closer to this idea that how much resemblance we'll get to the previous animals that we have, what kind of behavior. Again, they have made very specific changes in the DNA, right? We don't really know how what genes control behavior, for example.
Okay. So I have just one quick question related to
Yeah.
this very idea of de-extinction. Right? Why is there this fascination to revive extinct species? Is it just out of some curiosity, or is there some deeper existential longing, or something else? Right? As kids, for instance, and I think you also talked about Jurassic Park, right? So as kids and also many grown-ups are usually fascinated with dinosaurs. I would love to see them back, I guess. Is this the reason, or what is it?
Yeah, I think there's a mix of reasons, right? There is like I think genuine scientific curiosity about how the world might have been, 65 billion years ago, and what these creatures would have been doing. I mean, I sometimes think that like I'm walking down the streets of Mumbai, and I don't know, 65 million years ago there was a dinosaur walking here, really? Like it just it is really unfathomable, right? So there is
Depends whether the roads were good enough.
I could explain the potholes, maybe. But no. Seriously speaking, I mean, there is a bit of curiosity, right, about how these animals would have lived, they would have behaved. They just look so unreal when we think about them now, the gigantic sizes, etc. That there is some kind of intrigue about bringing them back just to see what they are. In case of some animals like the dodo, I think there might be some genuine remorse that human beings led to their extinction, and so should we? Is there a moral responsibility that we bring them back because we were just uncontrolled predators at some point of time? There is also a bit of this idea that perhaps bringing back some of the more extinct biodiversity will help our ecology harmonize and become a bit more steady than what it is. I'm not completely bought into that idea because I think there are far bigger challenges that our ecosystems currently face that have to be globally accepted, such as climate change, uh, than just bringing back a species that we think will radically change something. That's not how ecosystem works. The fact that a species has died, right, and I just spoke through the complexity of things that must have gone through to bring back a single species. You can imagine it must be so much far more complex to rebuild an ecosystem.
Hmm.
So it's not going to be easy. So I don't buy into that idea, but it is one of the arguments that has been presented. And then finally, there's the fact that we can do this. The fact that this is something that nobody else has, that even humans maybe a few years ago would not have been able to think that this was achievable, that we can bring back
Hmm.
animals which are dead. So,
Okay. So since you mentioned about the dodo thing, right, there is somewhat some remorse that okay, the extinction of dodo was because of human beings, right? So is it okay to view de-extinction as a way to provide some sort of justice for the harm that the species has had to suffer? Uh, isn't it like interfering with nature's plans, nature's wills, or again, if you're religious, maybe God's will?
so I genuinely believe that humans are extremely selfish, and the worldview is through only humans as a species, right? So we think about everything only from the human. Does it impact the human angle or not, or things like that. So we will change nature when it comes to it if it suits us, right? I mean, I am sitting in an air conditioned room, which is by, but the very fact that I'm sitting in an air conditioned room, I am changing the nature to my liking, whereas no other animal or species on the earth can actually do this, right? So we play around with nature's rules all the time. There is even when we think about bringing back animals now, We'll probably only think about animals that we are fascinated by, or that we are interested in. Right? It is unlikely that we will bring back things that are of harm to humans, or actually just are by side, are just by the side, which have no harm but also of no interest to human beings. Which, you know, we will probably not think about bringing animals from, say, deep marine species there, where where we have absolutely no clue what lives there. So, like, unlikely to bring those back. We will think from a human point of view of what we think we can yield at power best at, which is unfortunate. I mean, that has landed us in the position where we have led to the extinction of animals and plants and various species. But I don't think it's easy to let go of that worldview either.
Okay. So since you mentioned, right, we will most likely be trying to revive those species which are fascinating or which are useful. It can be other way around, right? Because there can be some species which are more harmful. They can be used for some sort of weapon, maybe, I don't know,
Yeah.
biological weapons, right? So some of you might revive some of species which can be used as maybe biological weapons.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the ethical questions about biodiversity is always this, that when people champion biodiversity and the fact we need to preserve biodiversity, viruses and bacteria and fungi and other pathogens are also part of the biodiversity. Um, but we will happily go around eradicating them because they are of harm to us. And I mean, I'm not saying that I'm not arguing that this is a bad thing, right? We do as what we have to do to survive as a species. Um, the only difference between us and others is that we can also modify the nature around us. We can beat nature's laws. We can beat the fact that we have to that only the fittest survive. So that's the difference that human beings bring to Darwinian evolution, and that also gives us a responsibility of think about, okay, if we have this power, how responsibly can we use it?
In fact, we have been using this power, right? uh, for instance, human beings, intergovernmental bodies, they try to do some of these things, and the governments will again formulate policies. For instance, the International Union for Conservation of Nature, it tries to categorize different kind of species based on threat perception, right? It has created certain categories. Some species are already extinct, some species are extinct in the wild, some are critically endangered, vulnerable. So according to these categories, again, the governments are supposed to create laws so that these species can be protected, so that they can continue to exist. So somewhere we are already trying to do that. Now, how is the goal of de-extinction fundamentally different from this, or there is similarity here, or maybe over a period of time de-extinction becomes a part of this?
Yeah, that is my biggest fear, because de-extinction brings with it the potential of moral hazard. So I think we understand to a lot of extent that. Okay, wait. Let us go just to the fundamentals of evolution, right, and the whole idea of survival of the fittest. What happens in evolution is that with time, the atmosphere, the climate evolves. As organisms surroundings change, they have to also evolve and adapt. Right. Usually, this process is powered through by genetic changes, by mutations, and it's a slow process. Um, and evolution, so this whole selection pressure, so the environment is putting selection pressure on organisms have to evolve to kind of adapt. When entire population of organism evolves and adapts, that's when you actually start seeing this whole survival of the fittest going through, right? So it doesn't happen at the level of the individual. What human beings have managed to do is really speed up the changes in the environment, right? Genetic catch up of for evolution is still pretty slow. And that's why a lot of species are dying out quicker, because the climate around them is changing rapidly, much more rapidly than they can actually catch up through mutations, etc. This is one of the reasons why we argue gene editing, for example, is going to be important for humans to master, because we also have to keep up now with the whole mess that we have created. Now we have two options. For at least for some time, there are two options for us. A, we try to go back on the damage that we are causing to the climate, and try to help ecosystems survive by limiting the damage that we are causing. B, we can say, okay, let the damage happen, we will rectify later on. And de-extinction is kind of fitting into that bubble, right? That we can say that, look, okay, we're sorry we caused all of this harm, we're sorry that you're dead, let me bring you back.
After
I have
some
the
point
power
of
to
time.
bring you back. Yeah.
Yeah, we have technology, we'll master that
Yeah.
and we'll.
Yeah. I'm not going to try and fix all of the other problems that I'm going to cause. I will just say that, okay, these are the species that I like. I'm going to bring them back because I like them, right? Because we don't know how they're going to choose which animals, which species to become de-extinct. Where is the money going to come from? Where are the ecosystems going to be created, etc. So there's a lot of governance issues that have not been solved. But there is, I think, a lot of potential for moral hazard that if this becomes really
Hmm.
mainstream, that we will, instead of trying to fix the root causes of why animals are going extinct, we will just say that, look, let them become extinct. We'll just bring them back. Or,
That's a very interesting perspective
yeah, that's my biggest fear with
and
this.
also sad.
I mean, till last year, I was fighting this whole idea that mosquitoes should be made extinct, and now I'm like, should dinosaurs be made de-extinct? And I'm still like, I don't think so. I mean, I don't think we have thought all of these ideas through very well.
So again, related to this, right? So since you mentioned about the survival of fittest thing, again, this is based on my limited understanding of Darwinian evolution theory, right? So the idea here is those organisms that are best adjusted to their environment are the most successful in surviving and reproducing. So another way to interpret this is those that are extinct now, in some way, they could not adjust, adapt to their environment. So they were most likely unfit or as per their environment, right? So why should we even resurrect those species? Because they could not adapt to the environment, they were possibly not as fit. And another way to think of it, if you have to resurrect these species and you have to ensure that they continue to survive, they continue to thrive, they continue to live, we have to put more efforts, right? Because they possibly need that kind of a environment, a different environment. So does it even make sense to put that much amount of effort, cost?
Yeah, so I don't know what the plan with even like the direwolves are, or what the eventual like big plan of de-extinction is. Right now, it's one company who's doing it in their labs. They have got massive funding to do this, which is great. These animals are in a controlled environment. It's not like they're out in the wild. But there was this idea that let's try to bring back the woolly mammoth or animals with some of those characteristics to be able to then impact grasslands in Siberia. I don't think it is that easy, because obviously the entire ecosystem has now evolved to live without those animals, and so you're actually going to disrupt the harmony that has now been reached. We do have, I mean, we have, I don't know, some kind of nostalgia from what the world was 100 years ago, 1,000 years ago, 10,000 years ago, and for some reason there is this idea that that ecosystem was good, the current ecosystem is not, and so let's try and fix the current ecosystem, which again I think speaks to the whole idea that climate change is occurring, it's occurring too rapidly, and we would, to save humanity, we have to save our ecosystems. But again, instead of trying to fix the problems that are causing climate change, we want to try and bring in other technologies or other drivers to see whether we can fix it, without having to deal with the human side of the problem. A, I think the ecosystems have changed. B, as you said, it is very difficult. You can't bring in like one species and say that expect that the ecosystem will change. Temperatures there would have changed. The microorganisms present in the soil might have changed. Plants might have changed their biochemical compositions. So the kind of diet that the woolly mammoth might have had might be different. We don't know how all of those changes will occur at a biochemical and a molecular level. It just seems a lot of risk, a lot of unknowns. Again, from a science point of view, to try and explore this is fabulous, right? As a scientist, I think it's just amazing that we might be able to do all of this. But from a public policy analyst point of view, I often wonder why do we really need to do this? I mean, we understand climate change, we understand its drivers, we understand what we need to do to stop it, or at least mitigate it or reduce it, and we are still not doing it because there are economic gains are still a bigger issue than trying to save the world. And again, if de-extinction becomes a reality, I see more Jurassic Park like things happening, than actually trying to save the world through ecosystem.
So you want to say that it can harm ecosystems?
It can, yeah. Again, it's you have to figure out what is wrong with the current ecosystem and wrong
Hmm.
for whom,
Hmm.
right? We think it is wrong right now because it is wrong for us because
Hmm.
I'm sitting in Mumbai, it's very hot.
Hmm.
Uh, but again, the way to handle that is planting more trees. It is not trying to get back dinosaurs.
Okay. Is there a possibility of de-extinction improving ecosystems? Like, again, my basic understanding of ecology, something that I would have read in maybe 12th standard. Some species are those keystone species, right? They, if you have those, then
It would, but again, like you said, it would take massive effort because it
hmm,
is not again bringing in just those species, right? It is a web, so you have to bring in everything that they require, or they will have to change and adapt to whatever is the current
hmm,
ecology of, say, you put them on an island.
yeah.
In which case, they might not still be, what you desire from that for that ecosystem. So yes, we could do it in like small drops. I mean, if we could terraform and have nice lush green, filled with animals and birds kind of terrestrial places on earth, I would love it. But it is not it is not that easy, and the answer for fixing the ecosystem problems lies with humans. It does not lie in other species.
But in the effort, or while putting, or while trying to figure out ways to bring them back, right? You might discover new things. You might find new ways which might be helpful. A few days back,
Yeah.
I was, for instance, reading an article, A Defense of Weird Research. And the key argument over there was odd experiments in pursuit of basic science frequently yield transformative discoveries that improve lives and, again, drive economic growth.
Oh,
And it had many examples, this article. And one of the things that stood out was in 1979, some researchers at Duke University, they were just trying to find out the effect if rat pups are separated from their mothers, and they found out that it actually impaired their development. And they found out that if these rat pups are given some massages, then again their health improves. You don't need the rat pups to be with their mother. So at that point of time, people thought that, okay, why are they doing this? Why should these kind of things be funded? But later on, it was realized that, okay, the findings over there were useful for humans, human preterm infants. If it was replicated in neonatal ICUs, these infants who were massaged, they gained weight, they had shorter stay in the hospitals, the cost of recovery, right? All these things went down, and the burden on the healthcare system went down. So there might be a case for supporting these kind of weird research. So
yeah, definitely. I think two from the life sciences, the two most recent examples, I think, are the CRISPR, the whole technology around which we have, tried to now build gene editing, and that has made gene editing easier. We already have cures for therapies for thalassemia and sickle cell anemia that have been approved across the world in the last year, right? This was just like basic fundamental research being done on bacteria for like 20, 30 years and on bacterial immune systems. And then, people build on that research, and eventually we ended up, actually using it for human therapies. The other was mRNA vaccines. That was university-led basic science research, and the scientist was told, what kind of research is this? This is never going to be of any use to anybody. And look, it saved lives around the world. So yeah, you never know what you will learn from. And again, as I said, as a scientist, I think there's much to gain. It's really cool for what has been achieved. As a public policy analyst, I have to wonder, if the company has raised billions of dollars, could that have been spent better elsewhere? But again, it's private money, so it's not something that, as a Takshashila public policy analyst, I want I would like to control. And again, I think there are going to be a lot of positives that will come out from the research itself.
hmm,
But the whole idea of should humanity be considering doing this at a bigger scale,
hmm.
that I think is questionable and needs a bit more conversation. So if we are going to do it, then we have to be a lot more responsible, and a lot more debate has to happen on how can this be achieved.
Yeah, so there is this interesting point, right? It was a privately funded thing, though it's fine. However, the costs of the final outcome can be on the society, right? You don't know what will happen. Maybe the species whichever has been resurrected might impact others also, right?
Yeah.
Not just. So, what should ideally be the responsibilities towards this revived species? What are some of the ethical concerns apart from the things that we talked about?
I mean, for me, the biggest concern of reviving a species is what I mean, are they of direct harm to humans? And one would argue that that has been well characterized. But we also don't know what kind of pathogens they played host to, right? And so might have just opened up a conduit for long dormant viruses, bacteria, other pathogens to now be able to jump into humans. And again, human beings have not seen these pathogens for a long time, so maybe our immune systems are not going to be prepared for that, right? And that for me is the biggest risk of trying to revive anything that has been extinct for thousands of years, right? I mean, so something that was only been extinct for 10, 20 years, maybe I'm still okay with the idea, but for thousands of years, that jumps to me as the first biggest risk of trying to bring those back. Other ethical concerns are obviously what happens, if they do turn out to be harmful. Can we just kill them off? I mean, you just brought them to life. Can you just kill them off? Like, I don't know. If there is a breach at the facility, and people outside the facility get hurt, or if there's an infection that spreads, etc., who's liability? Who's going to take liability on that? The world has just been through one liability nightmare, right? Through
Yeah.
COVID-19, we still don't know where it came from, and we'll probably still, I don't think we'll ever find out with complete trust of where it came from. But what happens? Who will take liability? Will the company really take liability if there is something that goes wrong? To what extent? I mean, there are real questions on those which need to be addressed. So I think that there are some ethical concerns with trying to revive a species. Again, where will we stop? How do you decide what species to bring back? One of my favorite questions, we have been talking about this at Takshila for a long time. Should the Homo sapien bring back the Neanderthal? I mean, we are one of the very few species where there's only one, right? So, should we bring back the Neanderthals? Because now we can. There are a lot of controversial questions around, with the power, what are the principles of use, right, that we have to figure out.
So, what are the principles that should governments keep in mind, or as policy enthusiasts, we should keep in mind?
Yeah, I think look at till it's only about research, and someone's willing to put up the money. There have to be standards around what kind of containment and control need to be put in, right? You really don't want again somebody bringing back pathogens because they think, hey, it's private money and it's controlled, but that's not the kind of research.
There are negative externalities.
But again, look, the diavolves are not going to be peaceful, right? They're just going to be easier to contain than a virus is very likely. That's the only difference, and limited in numbers. But again,
But if technology becomes generally with time, right? Technology becomes more accessible. In that case, you don't know. Things are becoming cheaper, and people are now resurrecting species in their. In their labs. And these labs can be in different parts of the world. Might become even difficult to contain.
Yeah. So that is going to be problematic. But if you think about like creating a market for de-extinction and de-extincted, if that's a word, species, which means that they're going to be out of controlled environments and or used for commercial purposes. So you create diavolves and then you ask people to pay tickets to see them. That's a very different ball game, and that's where you really need to think on why you are like meddling with something that has been dead and out of your way for a long time, and B, are the benefits actually outweighing the risks of trying to bring back something? So if they don't, I don't see. The research is fine. I mean, we'll learn from it. We can use it for more therapeutic purposes. Again, the human-centric worldview will persist there. That we can do better for humanity and for the current existing world as it exists, using that knowledge. But I'm not sold on the de-extinction idea. I mean, as someone who's very pro gene editing, this is really strange for me to say that.
See, you stopped at saying de-extincted animals will be there, and there might be a market for de-extincted animals where people can go and see those animals. There is also a possibility where markets might emerge where people can actually commission de-extinction of specific animals, and then market for those de-extincted animals can happen. I mean, can exist. Those things.
I think we are now. I genuinely don't know whether we're in a science fiction podcast or whether we are in a. This is actually happening out there, folks. Uh, Podcast anymore. Uh, yeah, it could happen. I mean, human ways are very, very weird, anyways. And we'll find economic opportunity wherever we can, which is scary. And so, again, I think the science by itself is cool. The question is, will we be able to use it responsibly enough?
Yeah, I think that's the best way to conclude this podcast with these thoughts. Thanks, Shambhavi, for joining me. Thanks to the listeners for tuning in. We'll meet again in one more episode of All Things Policy.
Thank you, everyone. Here's to looking at dinosaurs in a few years.
If you liked our show, dive into Takshashila's research on technology, strategy, and economic affairs. Check us out at our Twitter handle at Takshashila INST or our website takshashila.org.in.